Hello and welcome to What Goes Around once again. I am Eamon Murtagh.
And I'm Deb Grant, accompanied, as you can probably hear in the background, by some lovely builders having a chat. And it sounds like hammering some kind of chisel into something far too close to my house.
This is true, and I am happy to report that I too have some lovely building action going on. It's like that old Tom Waits song where he goes, "What's he building in there?" So, anyway, it all adds to an ambient noise that, puts the listener in a nice position.
Builders in stereo. That's what you came here for, isn't it?
That's what we want, down either end of the line. Anyway, what's on the show this week?
This week we have Lucy O Brien talking about her new book, Lead Sister, which is all about Karen Carpenter.
It is indeed, and she's a lovely lady to talk to. And I have talked to the King of Bristol. Yes, Mr. Geoff Barrow of Portishead has had a big long chat with me all about the birth of trip hop and Invader Records and the Bristol scene and growing up in Portishead. And yeah, it's a really good one. You're going to enjoy this.
Yeah, come on, let's pod. Come on, builders, you're coming too.
Yeah, come on. Yeah,
join the party.
Bring the plasterers. That's all we good for a laugh. Deb Grant, the D to the mofo in G. I'm talking about the Director General herself. What goes around?
Not the Director General yet.
Well, soon come.
It'll come. Well, I want to talk about a genre of music which I've spent my life avoiding. I'm not talking about house music. I'm not quite there yet. I'm talking...
Still?
Yeah, that's going to take a little while longer. I'm talking about metal music, which is something that I feel like this is quite a common thing, that people will be open-minded about music, but there'll be, one or two...
Sniffy.
Yes, yeah, exactly. They'll be sniffy about one or two genres, and often one of those genres is metal. And that was me, up until, Eamon, quite recently. So I started going out with this new fella. His name is Campbell. He's from New Zealand. He's lovely. I mean, it's tempting to just talk about him, but obviously that's not necessarily relevant.
Little love hearts in the eyes. It's so cute.
He's very handsome. But he is completely obsessed with music, makes these amazing playlists that he calls post-World War II playlists, where he picks a song from every year. And I went to visit him in New Zealand in the new year, and we just drove around the place listening to these playlists, and they're amazing. But he likes everything, and when I say everything, literally everything, and he has an encyclopedic knowledge of many different genres, including metal. And there was a lot of metal on the playlist, and I never expected to enjoy it, and it was like a door has opened inside my mind, and suddenly
leather trousers,
yeah,
leather
all
jackets.
Of that. I feel like I'm halfway there with the tattoos. Do you know what I mean? No one would be surprised to see me at a metal gig.
Shoe in the metal world.
Well, yeah,
he needs a big chopper now.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so he made me this special playlist to introduce me gently to all the different types of metal. The playlist.
Can you be introduced gently to metal?
I mean gently via the medium of Judas Priest. That's what I mean.
Okay. Yeah.
So, I'm a Priest fan now. I might get my mullet back. Nice. That's quite tempting. I found a Judas Priest t-shirt online, which I really liked, and I sent it to Campbell for his approval, and he was like, no, that's a shit album. And I was like, okay.
It's good to know an expert.
Yes, exactly. And obviously, I need to do more learning. But there's a band called Power Trip that I really like. I think that's speed metal, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm into it. And he's, when he's back in the UK, we're going to go to a metal gig together, and it's a whole new world. I think there's something. This is going to sound very snobby, so I'm just going to confide this in you, Eamon, and hopefully no one else is listening. And the sound of the builders doing whatever the fuck they're doing.
The builders won't hear you because they're making such a lot of fucking noise.
That's true. Hopefully they don't hear me. I don't want to, I don't want this to get out there. I think I've been quite snobby about metal. I think I've just thought of it as a pretty uncool genre, really. But then... I watch Heavy Metal Parking Lot, and I see the mullets, and I see the cut-off jorts and the vests, and it's like, yeah, that's me. What's the point in denying it, So yeah, what's your take? I've never heard you talk about metal. What's your take?
Well, so I've got quite a history with this because I got a job in a record shop as a 16-year-old. And it was at the start of that second wave of metal, like the new wave of British heavy metal kind of stuff. That all kind of, it blew up for the second time. So not your Deep Purples and your Black Sabbaths and all that kind of stuff, but the next wave, like the post-Iron Maiden years, you know, and also, because it was like sort of late 80s, it was all the hair metal stuff as well. So I am intimately acquainted with a lot of metal. I have, you know, something like a third of the shop's revenue came through heavy metal. So I did the lot. I did Slayer, I did Anthrax, and then equally I did things like the Choir Boys, or more like sort of soft rock hair metal stuff. Guns N' Roses released their Appetite for Destruction during that time. So it was a big explosion of stuff. And I was not into it when I started my job at the shop, and I really thought all of it was awful.
Is that because it was uncool? Is that why?
I think it's because it sort of allows a level of cliche on purpose. Now, there's no getting around it. Like metal, traditional metal definitely trades on a cliche. It's like big bikers, leather jackets, loose women, the devil, you know, power chords. All these things, they do happen, you know, and also, you know, the fans with their cut-off denim jackets and the patches and all that shit. Man, we sold so many patches. Oh, unbelievable. But, you know, it is kind of cheesy in its own way. And that was really off-putting to me at the time because I was quite a serious, like, art student. And kind of, you know, I'm listening to Sonic Youth and the dissonant noise. Don't bother me with your power chords. When you keep going through it and you hear, you know, I was hearing everything. And I suddenly had to admit to myself, much like yourself, that maybe I was just being a bit snobby because, especially on the fringes of metal, there are some amazing things happening. If you think about artists who really put themselves out of the ordinary and create something new. I mean, when I think back, I was really lucky because that was like the birth of Metallica and Megadeth. I loved Megadeth. They had like a punk ethos. I think they were kind of my doorway in because they had a punk ethos. They did a couple of Sex Pistols covers and stuff like that. And that kind of made me think, well, this must be all right. Come on, give it a chance. And then as I got more and more into it, I realised that it's a really creative genre.
Yeah.
You know,
it's very virtuoso-led as well, you know.
Yeah, or sometimes too much for me. You know, or that...
Yeah.
If I never hear another Stevie Vai fucking finger-tapping solo in my life, it'll be too soon. But great stuff around the edges. Things like, you know, the orchestral madness of Opeth, or the insane speed drill of Bathory and people like that. And also, the one I really love, and I don't know how far you've got into this, but stoner metal is killer. Yeah, have you done much of that?
I think you need to. I don't know. They might be on my playlist, so I don't want to.
So that, well, you'd know, because there's a band called Sleep who are like the kings of stoner metal, and Sleep, their album, which I think might be called Sleep itself, it's an hour-long heavy metal riff fest, but it's made for people who smoke a lot of dope, and it's like. And, you know, and it's you know, it's art, man. It's fucking art. You know, it's like, it's so out there. You can't possibly claim that they are not taking ideas out of their head and making them real for other people. And them and Boris and Sun O, that stuff is, you know, it's amazing. It's a real eye opener. Yeah. But you have to let the kind of metal sound, you got to allow it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You've got to allow it. And that's the same with quite a lot of music. I think sometimes when you only hear the sort of the little bits that half break through here and there, you can be quick to judge. But if you look in the whole scene and actually go a bit deeper, you can see, yeah, there are tropes that might be a bit creaky. But around those, if you allow that to happen, there's lots of really interesting stuff. So I approve of your metal stance. And I recommend South of Heaven by Slayer. That is a killer album.
Okay, I'm going to consult with Campbell on that one. Is it wrong that I'm 50% attracted to the aesthetic? as well as the...
I actually think that's absolutely right. When I worked in the shop, the kids used to come in and, like, you know, you could see the younger ones who are obviously following bigger brothers and sisters, and they'd come in and they'd look at the patch wall, that we had this wall full of different patches and badges, and then they'd kind of, I'll have the almighty patch, the Wolfsbane patch, and the big back patch has got to be Eddie from Power Slave, please. You know, and it's real sweet stuff. But you know, they wanted that look first of all, and kind of the music was an addendum to that, really, and that's fine. You know, I wanted to look like Peter Murphy before I bought a Bauhaus album. You know, that was the first thing I did, was see him on Top of the Pops and think, I want to be that guy.
Yeah.
So why not? And let a little metal into your life. Stride the motorbike, rev it up. Let's go.
Yeah. Who knows what's coming next, Damon? Techno?
I think it's good. I know
Trance?
it's coming next. I was going to say, let's play Born to be Wild by Steppenwolf. That's coming next.
Let's do it.
Don't do trance. If you're going to do trance, do early trance. What?
Seems like there's a strong objection outside to that as well.
Well, I liked that little sound that just came in from the builders, because that was literally a piece of heavy metal.
Yep, sounds like it.
If you look through any record collection from the mid to late 70s, there are a few things you will always find. There will always be a dodgy pop hit compilation, often not by the original artists. There will always be at least one ABBA album, and there will always be the best of the Carpenters. Now, whilst ABBA have kept the spotlight on themselves with Mamma Mia the Musical, their recent comeback and their holographic tour, the Carpenters legend has perhaps understandably dimmed in the mainstream since her death. But those record collections testify that Karen and Richard Carpenter were unbelievably successful for the decade or so they were around. Their music is still a staple on the easier-going radio stations around the world, and their story, depicting Karen's tragic descent into ill health through anorexia, has been told on TV and on the big screen. But it's high time their musical legacy and impact were reassessed. Thankfully, celebrated musician and author Dr. Lucy O Brien has written a new book called Lead Sister, which looks into not only Karen's health problems, but crucially, her undoubted and underrated talents as a drummer, musician and singer. Welcome to the podcast, Lucy.
Thank you. Hello.
It's so nice to have you here, and it's really lovely to have a chance to look again at the legacy of the Carpenters, because I do feel they slightly slipped away from the mainstream view of the music industry. But they had such an amazing amount of success when they were around, didn't they?
Yes, and I think what I mean, part of the reason I did this book is because it's this year, sadly, is 40 years since Karen died. But we thought we wanted to kind of celebrate her achievements rather than, I mean, for so long she'd been represented as a fragile victim, you know, the victim of the music industry, a domineering family, as a woman without agency. Whereas I wanted to kind of really explore and find out who she really was as a person and as an artist and a musician, pretty much in the same way that I have approached my other biographies, in particular Dusty Springfield, where I was reevaluating her life and legacy and what she achieved.
Yeah, I think it's a really important thing to do with the Carpenters, especially because so much of the story, it kind of obfuscates what the actual core of the band was about. So we know a lot about the fact that she died of anorexia and she had terrible mental health problems, etc. But what is often overlooked when we talk about the Carpenters, and especially Karen, is what an excellent musician she really was. She had a fantastic feel for drumming. She was a brilliant drummer. She had an incredible vocal range of 3 octaves or so. And she did some wonderful arrangements and production on her songs, didn't she?
Yes, and I think what surprised me, as I started interviewing musicians, friends, boyfriends, people who knew her, was how hardcore she was. She was a tough cookie, and she was very determined and very extremely intelligent. Musical. She kind of drove that band in lots of ways, just as much as Richard did. And in terms of her drumming, that was the thing, and I really wanted to go into that in depth because I thought it's quite fascinating that here's a 15-year-old girl. She doesn't put pop stars on her walls. She puts jazz drummers, posters of jazz drummers on her wall, like Joe Morello or Buddy Rich. And she takes drum lessons with jazz drummers in LA. And she's practicing and practicing and practicing. She gets her own kit as soon as she can. And that's her identity. First and foremost, that was her identity. And I think that's what really defined her approach to music. Very rhythmic, very on point, perfect pitch, and really dedicated. And the other thing that was so interesting as I talk to people and what I do is almost I like being fly on the wall. So I do interviews with musicians and find out, okay, so what did they do in the studio and get the nitty gritty. And she was there 24/7. She was there the whole time with Richard and contributing to the decision making about arrangements, particularly vocal arrangements. But then also around the musicians. Sometimes she wouldn't say that much, and sometimes she would contribute a huge amount to a recording session. So there was real collaboration there, and the sense of an independent voice. She had her own vision about what the band was.
Yeah, and I think, especially with Karen Carpenter, the sort of image we were fed by, I guess, the record companies on the whole, it doesn't really reflect that at all. We kind of led to believe that her brother did all the songwriting and the arranging and did all that stuff, and she was the girl who used to drum a bit, and then she got brought forward. And in a way, it's a bit of a shame that they took her away from the drum set, because when we say she was a drummer, this wasn't like a passing fad for her. She really studied drums, and as you say, she was taught by some great jazz players, and studied drum technique and all sorts of things, really becoming an expert in what she did. And then sadly, because they wanted someone front and center in the spotlight, she had to leave that behind really and move into a place at the front of the band where really she was never that comfortable, was she?
Yes, that's true. I kind of feel that she was de-skilled, that actually, her real love and passion was the drums. She loved singing as well, absolutely, but she was very comfortable doing both, which is quite a rare thing, to be able to drum and sing at the same time. And what's interesting is, I remember, I was pretty young when I first saw the Carpenters, and I remember the song, for instance, Rainy Days and Mondays. If you go and look at the video for that, she's drumming and she's singing, and it looks really natural, and it makes the band different, distinctive. They had their own identity. Nobody really had a problem with her drumming and singing. It was only sort of some rather strange, good old-fashioned sexism. We're talking about 1970s sexism, which is, well, you can't really sell the song if, and it's not very feminine, and, it doesn't, it looks a bit strange. And so they take the drums away, and then she has to stand up front, and she feels utterly exposed. And I think that didn't help the problems that she had already in terms of feeling just scrutinised, and then that kind of fueled the anorexia later.
Yeah, and also I think you mentioned how involved she was in the recording process itself. When people think of the Carpenters, quite often we think of, Close to Me and a very simple piano, maybe a bass guitar and her voice and very little else. So, it's a very intimate kind of setting. But actually their sound over a period of time, really took on quite a lush quality. And there was a lot of, especially with the vocal arrangements and things, there was a lot of work done in the studio. I mean, I remember as a kid, I used to really enjoy listening to Calling Occupants from Interplanetary Craft, which is both ridiculous and sublime. But if you listen to that now, I was listening to it this morning, and it swells from this quite small, intimate song into this giant orchestral piece. You know, I think they had something like 160 players on it. And, you know, not just that song, but all of the later period, you can feel the work that she did. And we were never really even told that that's what she did.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting to see, you know, certainly in terms of the vocal arrangements, there was a lot of her own decision making there. You know, that's what production is. It's not just someone. It's funny. When I was doing my book about Dusty, you know, as a point of comparison, she had a quote unquote difficult reputation. People thought she meddled too much in the studio, but basically she was contributing and talking to musicians and making decisions about how she wanted the sound to be. That's production. So I kind of feel with Karen that she was contributing to the decision making in a way that she should have maybe had more credit. For instance, she loved pushing those vocal harmonies to the extreme. So it's like, let's just not just go wah, let's just go wah. I think she was quite experimental in approach, and there was one lovely. I found a really, you know, I did a lot of archive work going through radio interviews and finding obscure radio interviews that they'd done way back, and there was one where she was completely enthusing about being in a choir when she was at Cal State University with Richard, and a really experimental vocal piece about the Holocaust that pushed it completely to the edge. But she said it was amazing. She loved that kind of really almost avant-garde approach, and I think, well, God, that's so interesting. We you know, the received notion is that she was this sort of cutesy pie lead singer, and a bit schmaltzy, a bit saccharine, but there was this whole other side to her.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that we go back and look at some of these legacy artists especially from the 70s, because as you said, I mean, the 70s was perhaps the high watermark of pure sexism in the industry. It was just that time, and we often only hear secondhand about the work that women did at that time, and it's really good for someone to go back and try and tell the story from Karen's point of view, because I think we've heard a lot from her brother, we've heard a lot from the music industry as a standard, but we haven't really gotten to the nitty-gritty of her talents and her drive, and I think it's a really good job that you're getting in there and bringing that to us.
Thank you.
I really look forward to reading the book in full. I've dipped in a little bit and it's looking really good. Where can we get a copy of the book? It's called Lead Sister, and it's the Karen Carpenter story by Lucy O Brien. Where can we find it?
So you can go to Rough Trade. You can go online or go in the shop and you'll get a signed copy. Or you can go via Resident or Waterstones, any good bookseller, Amazon, of course. Anywhere, go for it.
All good bookshops, as they say.
All good bookshops, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us today, Lucy. I really appreciate that, and I think it's going to be a really fascinating story to read. And thank you for all the work you're doing, reassessing these important people from the past.
Thank you.
What we're gonna do right here is go back,
way back into time.
That's right.
Name that tune. Get up, everybody. Name that tune. Rock the house, y'all.
Today we welcome a composer, producer, musician and label owner who's left an indelible mark on the UK music scene. Over the past 30 years, Geoff Barrow has carved a reputation for forward-thinking audio, From his genre-defining work with Portishead to the gentle psychedelia of Beak and a host of film scores including Annihilation, Black Mirror and Devs. He's mixed and remixed the likes of Gonga, Run the Jewels and Billy No Mates. His production credits include Tom Jones, The Quakers and the Mercury Prize-nominated Primary Colours by The Horrors. Never one to court the limelight, he's quietly amassed a portfolio of incredible depth and influence, and we are delighted to welcome Geoff Barrow to What Goes Around. Hello, Geoff.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm very pleased to have you on. It's lovely to speak to you. And I've got a lot of your records in my record collection, so it's going to be a
good.
Nice chat.
that's always a bonus. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes you do an interview and it's like, who are you again?
I basically just search out people who I have records by and go, I want to talk to you.
Yeah, no, that's a really good idea. Really good.
But yeah, how are you doing at the moment? What's going on in your world? What are you working on and stuff?
I've always been based in Bristol. I've got a studio here and a record label, Invader. Mm-hmm. We release soundtracks and people's albums. So at the moment we've just released a Billy No Mates album, which is flying, and then we'll do kind of the soundtrack of Stranger Things or Blonde by Nick Cave and Warren Ellis. It's pretty varied stuff on the label, but there's that side, and then the Beak, my band Beak, we tour a lot. But mainly out of the UK. We've just come back from South America at the end of last year. We did Argentina and Brazil, and then I do film. I still work on a lot of film stuff. So I did Alex Garland's film Men, and we've just literally finished his next film called Civil War, which will be out next year. I was just doing the 5.1 mix of that for cinema. It's kind of quite a lot going on always in my world. I try and keep busy.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I had no idea about how many soundtracks you've been involved in, and I actually loved the Annihilation soundtrack. I thought it was really, really great. I didn't know it was you that did it.
That's actually my main job now. I basically started. I was the music supervisor on Exit for the Gift Shop, and I wrote some score for the Banksy film. And then got introduced by someone to Alex Garland, who was making the Dread movie. And then we started working on that, but it didn't happen mainly because I think they wanted something else out of the movie, and it got to the point where the only thing that they could change was the score, was the composers. Right. It sometimes gets to that point. And the direction they wanted us to go in, I'm a massive 2000 AD fan, and that's the reason I was doing it. And then what happened was they wanted to go somewhere else, so we kind of walked away and said, "Sorry, Alex, I can't let my first score be something I don't want to write."
Especially with something you love as well.
Yeah, and the film was great. And then he said, "Look, next time I do a film, you're in." So we did Ex Machina. And then we've gone through with him ever since. And then since then we've done like I said, Black Mirror. Tons and tons of stuff, like some Netflix stuff, and Devs and Ben Wheatley. We did Free Fire with Ben Wheatley, and Archive 81, which is about on Netflix, and just it's kind of like I said, my daily job, and I kind of really enjoy it because it's not songwriting anymore, it's not songs.
Is that nice to get away from that then? Is it a lot of pressure comes because you had such a level of success, again it must be kind of like daunting to even go back and think, I've got to do that again, and I've got to do it again, I've got to do it again,
No, I think that I've always had I've always loved the idea of experimentation, and a lot of what Portishead was based on were snippets of film soundtracks anyway. So this is just it's kind of a continuation of that, but I can actually make the whole record instead of just creating 2 bars of it to loop for a song, but I not saying that was anything bad, because obviously it's Portishead has been my life for many years, and it's been brilliant.
Yeah, and it's good the way a lot of people start and they have a bit of success, they do leave where they came from. And it's great the way you've stayed here and made it happen here. And like one of the reasons certainly I moved to Bristol was because when we looked around, you know, I'm a DJ, so I was looking for places that love the music, and Bristol is just steeped in it. And you know, your name pops up a lot, along with a few other regular suspects, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But it's great that you've all stayed. Do you know what I mean? You've actually kept things going here and are still, you know, helping local-ish artists make their mark, like Billy No Mates.
Yeah, I get involved in a lot of bands. I'm not saying that kind of, you know, Saint Barrow, but basically I you know, if I know a band and they want some studio time, I'll give it to them. Do you know what I mean? Like, It doesn't matter if they're like a rock and roll band from Fish Ponds or whatever, and they want to record, then, you know, if I've got spare time, you know, then they can have it. I've done that. I've kind of done that for years, really, and mainly because I've known, you know, I go to gigs and I've known promoters and they've gone, oh, have you heard this band or whatever. So, Bristol, to be honest, you know, you've lived down here for a year or so now, isn't it? And and to be honest, it's that thing when you come down here, you don't want to leave. It's actually, I moan about the city, but I ain't gonna live anywhere else. You know what I mean? Unless it's like on a beach somewhere when I retire. But
I think you know, in Wales, only 20 minutes drive away here. It's fine. No,
I ain't doing that. Bristol's a great city. I kind of, I know I shouldn't really say this, but you know, you get a lot of people moving in who've got money, and like I said, I want to still support the people that are from Bristol as well, that are kind of getting missed out a little bit, and it's a kind of something I kind of strive to do. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's very laudable, and it's a good thing that, lucky for Bristol, they have you, and lucky for you, you have Bristol. I guess that's the.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's like we've all stayed here. You know what I mean? Beth lives, you know, 3/4 of a mile from me. Aid's about 2 miles. You know, it's not because you're out in the country. It's a progressive city as well. I mean, you know, definitely. when it comes down to trans rights or LGBTQ rights, in that sense, you know, there is, you know, it's always been a punk, you know, movement down here through the music as well. You know, through you know, the pop group and all that stuff. You know. He's, you know, Mark Stewart's basically the unofficial kind of ambassador of Bristol, really.
Yeah. He's I mean, I love him because what I like about Mark Stewart is that he is both very forthcoming and quite tricksy and troublesome. You know, he's
really offensive. Yeah,
he's got the devil in him. I mean, the devil in him, and he don't care.
No, because he's a punk. He's a punk. If public opinion goes so far one way, rightly or wrongly, he'll question it. Do you know what I mean? He's an agitator, and if you look at any artwork that's ever, you know, like art, music, you know, whatever comes out of Bristol, it always agitates. That's why I love the city. I politically I love it because it you know, you're not supposed to get too comfortable here. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I hear that.
In a sense of like, before someone asks you a question, going, look at you, you're a bit cool, aren't you? Or you think you're a bit cool, don't you? Do you know what I mean?
Keeps you grounded.
Yeah, definitely that'll happen. Yeah.
That's an important thing to do. You know, obviously your band literally is named after a part of Bristol, so it's obviously very close to your heart. But you also had this amazing, I mean, it must have been like being strapped to a rocket ship, really, because you'd got a little project that was going that, let's face it, was pretty weird and quite out there. And I think if you'd played it 2 years before you released it, people would have scratched their heads and wondered what to do with it. And then it really became like a global phenomenon. I mean, how was that to ride the back of?
Yeah, it didn't matter what people thought of it. You know what I mean? So, like, whether it had been 2 years before, I'd been making that music 2 years before.
Yeah.
So for me, it was just, you know, and I suppose you would say for kind of people in and around this area, it wasn't that weird. Do you know what I mean? We'd had Smith and Mighty, and we'd had the Wild Bunch, so it's not really. Obviously, we wanted to be ourselves massively.
Yeah, and you definitely achieved that. You know?
But we never reached for success. Success was great to have. It's enabled us to live comfortable lives with our families and so on. But ultimately, it wasn't. I promise you now, the moment that we were, like in the charts in America or Germany or whatever, it really wouldn't affect us. I mean, our ex-manager would say, I cannot believe how non-interested you are in the success. and I don't mean that in a cool way, because it's not about being cool. It was about achieving songs that moved people, you know what I mean, or moved yourself, or you're able to. It was always inward looking rather than outward. So we were quite happy turning stuff down. The first thing we got asked to do was open the Brits, 94 or something, and we turned it down. It's just like, I don't understand why. It's because it's like, well, it's crap. Why would anyone want to do that? It's rubbish. Yeah.
But I think that's one of the reasons why Portishead has retained its cool, if you like, because you never have courted fashion, so you've never been the type, you're not the type to go chasing headlines in the NME or the Melody Maker, as was.
Well, it's all about blokes. I mean, it was a very male-orientated, unless you're a female singer that kind of like did the sexy thing and slipped into that kind of, indie pint-drinking girl. Do you know what I mean? At that time, then basically, I mean, the Melody Maker said a few nice words about us, but the NME were never interested because it's about men. It's a men's magazine, basically. and if you're a female reader, you were like I said, you were expected to be a pint drinking, football watching girl.
Yeah, it's the age of the ladette, wasn't it? So,
ultimately the other thing is all that stuff was going on in the UK, all the Blur Oasis stuff, and we just really enjoyed going to France and Germany and Switzerland or anywhere other than the UK, to be honest. It was just that, real cool Britannia bravado.
It doesn't seem like your bag, if I'm honest.
No, absolutely. Well, no, not coming from Bristol.
On your way up to starting your career in music, I mean, what were the things that you listened to when you were young? I noticed your first choice for your phonographic memories is The Laughing Policeman by Charles Penrose. Is that a childhood memory that sparks that? Yeah.
Basically, that was the first time I ever realised that music existed out of the universe. Do you know what I mean? So, because obviously I would have heard music in the background before, but as a child I would have never taken any notice about it. It's just. But one day I lived in a little village outside of Portishead for a little while, and they had a village shop, and I went into the village shop and I heard this song, and it was coming from a cornflakes packet. And obviously the radio was behind it.
Right. I was wondering where this is going.
I was like, what? I was like, what the hell is that? And it freaked me out because it's a really freaky song.
Yeah. I've actually got a friend who is terrified of it. Every time she hears the laughter start, she has to turn it off immediately, or she has a bit of a freak out. So.
No, I know. Yeah, my wife Emma's like that with the hokey cokey. she literally has to run away from the hokey cokey and cover her ears. But but yeah, and I heard it, and I just thought, there's a radio behind there. And then I just thought, that's a radio, and it's playing music, and music, went to a different song, and I thought, that's a song, and so that means, and then that whole existence of actual music, clicked into my brain. I was only very young, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it was kind of the realization that music wasn't just in the universe that you heard, that you danced along to, or sang along to. Do you know what I mean? It was like, it's a thing, and they play it out this box.
Was there music in your house growing up? Was it a musical place?
No, not really. No, it was like proper, it would have been Leo Sayer, Boney M, like Top of the Pops.
Yeah.
That kind of would have been it. But strangely enough, we did have a record collection in a box, these singles that my dad owned and my mum owned, and we did have a kind of a dance set, like
Classic.
One from the 60s, and that was our record player. That we didn't. No, later we got a second-hand stereogram, which I still love now. It's the cabinet with the two big speakers in it, and a radio with the vinyl down the side. But
I missed that age of when stereos were actually bits of furniture as well. Do you know?
Oh God, yeah.
When everything was a beautiful bit of wood and there was a beautiful speaker inside it. That was a golden age.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, it's weird because about 9 I started playing the drums I started having drum lessons for no particular reason. I'd never shown any. I don't know what. My sister rode horses and worked at stables in her spare time. So, and I was like, right, well, I wasn't into football, so it was kind of like, there's your thing that you're doing. So yeah, and then you start buying singles, don't you, from Woolworths, and my sister was really into Duran Duran and stuff, and then I suppose I would have been into Duran Duran and I've been 17, and the Police, stuff on the. Oh, sorry about this.
That's okay. We love a dog. We love a cat.
Yeah, I would have basically slipped into, when I went to school, I moved from the village into my uncle's house whilst my parents broke up, and then very instantly I got into kind of breakdancing and early electro music, and that was kind of, but I was still in. Also, it was weird because I had a dual kind of musical thing. Like I was in school bands, and I would play soft rock, like Eye of the Tiger, Survivor, and kind of that kind of stuff. But it obviously, because I played the drums, I would never play electro music because it was just
there's no drums, no real drums in it, as they used to say.
No. So so that was, I mean, that was pretty standard, really, of a kid in '82. I missed all the I didn't get into the rude boy stuff. I didn't know anything about it, really. I lived in a village, so I had, 2 older goths lived in the village who were into the Cure and that, and they were seen as kind of the weirdos. That electro thing and me playing in rock bands was kind of it.
So I guess that leads us rather neatly to your second choice, which is Rebel Without Pause by Public Enemy. I mean, for a lot of people, I think that particular era of the 80s, just as hip-hop really started to come up, that was a very different sound to the things that were going around at the time. How did you discover it, and how did you get into it?
Well, basically, I can't remember what year that came out. So Bum Rush the Show had already come out at that time, which was the first Public Enemy album, which was really good. But I was going to a nightclub in Bristol for under 18s called the Studio, and I used to get a bus up. A load of us used to get a bus up from Portishead, and then go into this nightclub, and it would be from 7 to 11 or something, and it was full of basically it was like a massive school disco, but it was kids from all over Bristol, and it was proper. It was proper casual clothes, you know. So it was like fleck trousers, you know, slip-on shoes with acorns on them. Do you know what I mean? Like
the classic loafers and white socks vibe.
yeah, it was proper us failing to look like that. You know, it wasn't even there wasn't even Lacoste or anything. You weren't even like into that. You know what I mean? And you're trying to look like your 20-year-old brother. Do you know what I mean? Who goes out in town, you know. So, and obviously the main thing that people went there for was girls and boys, really. You know what I mean? Like, and it was run by a guy called Tristan B, who's like, has been a DJ here for years and years. He's a lovely guy. And he was the DJ there. And so he used to play kind of, you know, like Living in a Box by, is it Living in a
Living in a Box by Living in a Box.
Yeah, Living in a Box. There would be Don't Look Any Further, you know, that track. There would be I Want to Dance with Somebody, you know, Whitney Houston. It was like a, you know, it's like a disco.
Yeah.
Kind of, like I said, a big school disco. But there was always a hip hop contingent of lads there. And so he would play like, you know, quarter of an hour of like a proper hip hop set, like, so it would be LL Cool J or whatever, and he was really up on his hip hop as well. And I can remember being upstairs, and then you've got to imagine as well, this is a studio nightclub, so it's most probably holds 1,000 kids.
Really,
right?
That big?
Yeah, holds 1,000 kids, and the sound system there is crushing. It's amazing. It's like super brilliant. And because obviously at the weekend it's a big dance, you know, like disco club or whatever. You know. I was stood upstairs. I was getting some chips or something. They had these seats that you could sit around and look at the balcony over. And Tristan was on the stage, and this guy comes legging it in. I saw him come in, this young black guy, and he had this record with him, and Tristan got it out and kind of flipped it. It was a white label. Flipped it and queued it up or whatever. And I can't remember what he was playing, some terrible track or whatever. And he's just like, and he goes, right, this is for the hip hop guys. This is for, you know, this is a groundbreaker. You know, get ready to the bass. You know, and it kind of did that talk up. Yeah. And I was like, oh, this sounds like it's going to be good. And then he stopped the track and played it. You know, and the intro came in, and he played it so loud that I literally got floored. I had to sit down, and it was such a moment for me. Yeah. I thought, right, well, music is that now. I'm not doing anything else.
This is my calling.
This is my calling, because it was like a religious experience. It was like so strange. And then I absolutely just concentrate on music from then on.
Yes, the rhythm, the rebel. Without a pause, I'm lowering my level. The hard rhymer, where you never been, I'm in. You want styling? You know it's time again. D, the enemy, telling you to hear it. They praise the music, it's time to play the lyrics. Some say no to the album, the show. Bum rush the sound. I made a year ago. I guess you know. You guess I'm just a radical. Not on sabbatical, yes, to make it critical. The only part of your body should be partying too. Pass the power on the hour from the rebel to you.
Hey, yo, Chuck, man, I don't understand this, man. Yo, you got to slow down, man. You're losing them.
Radio, suckers never play me. All the mix, they just okay me now. Known and grown. When they're clocking my zone, there's no sneaking and taking everything now the brother owns. My calling card, recorded and ordered. Supporter of Chesimard, loud and proud. Kicking live, next poet supreme. Loop but true, bazooka, the scheme. Flavor, a rebel in his own mind. Supporter of my rhymes, designed to scatter a line of suckers who claim I do crime. They on my time, dig it.
Hey, yo, Chuck, they think we taking shots. Show 'em this is Cole Medina, man. Come on, kick it.
Terminator X.
Because I was a DJ, and I'd entered like the DJ competition there like 6 months before, you know, scratching and all that kind of stuff, because I was that age, you know. But this really just cemented everything that I wanted to happen in the it was these, political lyric, based on African American culture, in ghettos in America. Like, I was from Portishead. You know what I mean?
It's funny how that stuff, resonates anyway, doesn't it? Because I had the same thing. I was growing up in a market town in Oxfordshire, and you hear things like that, and it'd be totally alien. But there's something about it that you can connect with. And I think something else that you mentioned just now was like you're kind of lucky to have this enormous club to do. A lot of people on the podcast in the past have talked about, we had Andy Dawson on from Atletico Mints, and he talked about the first time he'd heard proper amplified music was at the fair. And a few people have mentioned that, because that's one of the few places, if you live in a little provincial town, where someone comes in and they've got a proper rig. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
The difference in your brain when you're just kind of hearing music and then when you're feeling it, I certainly had moments where it changed my outlook on what music should be.
Well, Revelled Out Pause is basically the funky drummer with another James Brown saxophone loop, but with every time the bar kind of the 4-bar hits or whatever, there's a massive sub bass, which is unbelievably powerful. So it literally shakes you, and for me that was that's what did it. You're absolutely right about fairgrounds though. We had them in Portishead, and it would be it'd be soul stuff really. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And Pet Shop Boys, isn't it?
A lot of those fairground people, because I don't know if it was more of a static thing because obviously you're near the seaside, but in our town, those fairground people, they would bring music in, the underground music that you didn't hear on the radio. They would the first kind of big reggae things I heard were really in fairgrounds. Certainly the first hip hop I ever heard was in fairgrounds, and the first acid house I ever heard was at the fair. So. Their kind of nomadic existence, I guess, allows them to sort of pick and choose and find things that don't come through the normal channels and bring it.
Well, absolutely. It's exciting. It's really weird because it's obviously it needs to mix, doesn't it? It needs to be continuous, and obviously, kind of mix cassettes were great for fairground rides. You know what I mean? Because you could have a 90-minute mix on both. It just would have been wicked. Yeah, no, we had a similar thing with fairgrounds. You know what I mean? But it was always big fights, between like the local lads and the fairground kids.
That was my overriding memory of the fairgrounds. It was like running home, trying not to get beaten up. But you were DJing already, you say? You already did you have your turntables, or how were you getting access?
Yeah, no. So basically, I met Andy Smith really early on, and he had a set of decks, but I mean, there's a guy called Patrick Hennessy who I went to school with, and around the same time as kind of breakdancing and everything else, he had a set of disco decks, and he would go to Bristol every weekend and get a new 12-inch, or what was really common was that he would have the Electro Sounds album, of course, with the electro, so which would have all the new tunes on them. Like, a fair few months later, but on a compilation album. So you had, in theory, you could have all those tracks. You know what I mean? So me and him became scratch together, really. You know what I mean? Used to listen to, like those records and DST and Molly Marl and all these people doing scratching, and we kind of just used to do it. And then I bought a deck, so I used to scratch, on a deck whilst with a cassette recorder playing, and then it wasn't until I got my deal with Portishead I actually got a pair of Technics, because I could no way ever afford them, really. I mean, even Andy Smith had his disco decks for many years. I think he was playing on Technic decks in Bristol, but still coming back to his disco decks. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
There's an old saying in the DJ world. It's like, you're not a real DJ unless you've properly battled an old set of belt-driven decks for a couple of years.
Oh, man, yeah.
That's where you really learn to control that platter, isn't it?
Yeah, with no faders, but then, so I can't, and it was weird. I carried on drumming, but yeah, the Public Enemy tune. I mean, about when we did third, Portishead did third and we did some ATPs and we did a Primavera Sound, and Public Enemy were playing, and we asked Chuck D to join us on a track, and he did it once. And he did it twice actually. The second time it worked out really well. The first time there was feedback problems, but just meeting him, and
that's amazing.
It was kind of like I could easily just given up music then. I could have so the idea of Chuck D actually rapping on a beat that I had made, and him digging it was just the end, because it's like, I've done my little bit.
Yeah. Well, they were such an important band. There's a beautiful documentary the BBC did about hip hop where Rodney P basically goes over to America and meets a lot of rappers. And there's a bit where he's waiting in the room for Chuck D to arrive, and he's a big tough lad. He's hardcore hip hop head. He wouldn't mess with him. He's a super fly guy, and he just bursts into tears, and starts talking about how much it meant to him, and how Public Enemy, as a young black man growing up, totally changed his world. You know what I mean? And they had that effect on people. They were so different and so. I mean, because again, they were always voicing for the underdog, weren't they? So you kind of, even as a little white kid, you kind of felt like they were the good guys.
Well, it was that thing, they did a track with Anthrax, didn't they?
Yes,
with,
and
it was really interesting, I think, because of America and because of what was going on, in America at the time. It was very much based on black culture. And then when they came to Europe to play, they realised the majority of their audience was white, and it really threw them.
Yeah,
I've seen documentaries where Chuck D's like, they're all white. Do you know what I mean? And it was a serious question, because they were like, oh no, what's happened? But then they realised, and it changed their attitude as well a lot. And then since then it's been, obviously it's the voice of the underdog, really. Definitely. Do you know what I mean?
I can see how that as well, set you up for what you later did. Do you know what I mean? Those skills.
It's weird.
And the table and all that.
It's weird. Yeah, it's weird because Portishead was always seen as one thing, but actually was written and meant to be something else. It's like, you get people like, so to a lot of people, it was like after they've been out on pills and come back and chill out record. But for us, it was weird, because I mean, I'm never going to stop anyone buying one of our records, but it was always meant to have a message. Beth's own personal struggles. It wasn't like she was singing, sometimes she sang love songs, but ultimately it wasn't. It was about struggling with mental health, and it was really weird how it got absorbed into, it was used a lot on This Life, about that young lawyer's.
Yeah,
and it was like, I hated it. I absolutely hated it.
Because they repeated it not long ago, and I totally got why you'd hate it. But at the time, I remember thinking it was great, because it was one of the few shows that was referencing things like Portishead and Acid House and rave and all that. And there wasn't much of that in the mainstream, and I was a
no, I get it.
That,
No, I totally get it, but it was. I think that's why we maybe kind of stayed out of this country a bit, because of where it's like Germany, it seemed to, and in France, they seemed to understand that it didn't have to be punk music or really heavy music to mean something other than a love song.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Well, I think the other thing about your productions is that, they're big beats, you know, they're actually really danceable. You know, if you put them out loud, sure, if you stick it on in the morning after a heavy night, you can chill and blah, blah. If you put it on a system and you play Sour Times, that's a chunky bit of grinding beats and bass. You know what I mean? So there's a whole nother way of listening to it, I feel.
Well, that was the primary way of listening to it. There was no other way for us. Do you know what I mean? People's perceptions is one thing, but our view of it, I was listening to the Wu-Tang. I wasn't listening to Moby.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And so that's what has been like a strange thing about it. It's a bit like when I talk to Alex about the beach, you know, like Portishead they're very similar. He wrote the beach to say how disgusting things these people were, and people used it as a kind of guide to travel. You know, Thailand.
Yeah, it became like a tourist thing, didn't it? Yeah.
It became a tourist thing. I literally remember he went touring, you know, traveling himself, and there would be people in the airport with it, like, oh, this is the Bible. This is what you got to do. And it's like, no. I'm saying these people are disgusting. You know what I mean?
You let that art go, though, it has its own life. You know.
Well, you can't control it. Yeah, no, and absolutely, and I would never intend to, but if I get a chance like this to kind of say what we were thinking at the time, that was it. It was definitely wasn't like a chill out fondue dinner with your friends.
I mean, it's great to hear that. You know, it's nice to hear, you know, from you like how you felt about it, because I think it is. I mean, I hate the term, but a lot of people say, "Oh, it's coffee table music," but it's not. You know, because it's got serious content. Like I say, if you put it on something loud, it's going to move you. It's got, you know, it's a powerful thing. It's not. I mean, if anything, you got more powerful and more like disturbing as you went on. You know, like Third is a you know, a shocking record. It absolutely blows me away.
Yeah, well, it was just to make sure that no one got the wrong idea this time.
Mission accomplished.
But actually, it's weird. It's because that was our most successful record in America. Strangely enough, it was like, or I think it was like number 2 in the album charts there or whatever. But it's just very odd, you know. But now, I mean, it's like, so now I'm, you know, I've spent a lot of the time touring with Beak. You know, there's 3 of us. There's me, Billy, and Will, and there's only 3 of us. We travel with 5 people, and we'll fly on EasyJet with a couple of cases and go and play somewhere, and it's been an amazing thing, because I started it in 2009. It wasn't meant to be music that was liked, really. It was music that we wanted to write, that we liked, and getting playlisted like on Radio 6 and stuff, and you just and I'm not, like I said, I'm not complaining, but it was never really about that. But yeah, we've played 500 shows, so many shows over the years, and it's been really good fun, and we continue. Like I said, we just come back from South America, in Brazil and Argentina, and we go to Mexico a lot because we've got a good fan base there, and it literally is like, you know, I play drums and sing, and it's just really good fun, because Portishead had been so powerful, and so, I mean, you know, we made every decision in our careers with Portishead. You know, we had management, but we never trusted them, luckily enough. And you know, we had a label that supported us, so we could do stuff. But that meant there was a lot of pressure, especially when it got really big on us, because you know, there's a lot of money flying around, and you're turning stuff down, you know, because you go, well, that's a non-ethical, you know, someone would come along that's really an unethical fashion brand or something, and they'll offer a load of money. We're like, we can pay our mortgage. We don't need to support your you know, your mink murdering shit, you know. So yeah, Beak has been totally amazing. We've done like 4 albums, and
I was reading today that wasn't the first album pretty much cut live.
No, basically it's complete opposite. It's always been complete opposite. So Matt, we had before Will, we had a guy called Matt, and as a 3rd member, And basically, we met at an Invader Christmas party, and did this thing called an acid test, where you bring your instrument and you just play you just play jam or whatever. And Billy was there, and I said, "Look, do you guys fancy meeting in the studio one day?" And I set up, I went, "Bill, you play that bass," and which was this really horrible bass, and Matt, play that keyboard and that synth or whatever. And we sat down, had a cup of tea, started playing, and the first thing we played is the first track on the album.
Brilliant.
And that's how it worked. It was just from sessions over a couple of weeks, and it was a complete opposite. It came out on my own label. It's complete opposite of everything I've ever done, which was so refreshing, Well,
you can see, looking at your choices again, you're obviously a man who has a really broad range of tastes. You were doing your rock bands at the same time as getting into hip hop. The Laughing Policeman was your starting gun, And your third choice is Just Make It Stop by Low, which is a beautiful song, very much in the indie vein, very, very sort of soft and yet has quite a lot of power in it. Tell us a little bit about Low and why that song spoke to you.
Well, it's Low are a very, very special band. They're from America. They're a three-piece, but mainly consist of Alan and Mimi. And sadly, Mimi passed away at the end of last year. When Portishead there's a series of concerts and a festival called ATP, and over the years we've booked Low to play, and they're amazing people, and they must be on their, I don't know how many albums they've done now, maybe 8 or 10, but they've been going for a long time, and they're just, when someone says someone's a beautiful person, you know what I mean? They really are. I didn't know Mimi. I know Alan slightly better. I said to hello to Mimi a couple of times, but I think she must really thought I was a dick, to be honest, because it was at a festival. Like, hello. But they're just a band that surpasses all the bullshit of the music industry and the modern, media era. It's really weird actually, because since Mimi's death, I've still not been able to really go back and listen to her music yet. I'm a bit kind of sore on that front, and not like I knew them greatly, but I can remember, listening to their music and just, I've seen them live loads as well, and they're just an incredible band. Mimi used to play the drums stood up, and it was really soft and gentle, and Alan plays guitar, and I can't remember the other guy's name who plays keyboards and bass, which is a really rubbish thing to say because I should know the guy's name. And their last couple of albums have been really extreme, like in the production and noise, and for them to be on there, how many albums they've been on, and still be making challenging music, and Just Make It Stop. Like I said, I haven't heard it since Mimi died because I don't know, it's a bit raw really, but if her voice, the lyrics, the production, it's just purity. There's no shtick, there's nothing to it. It literally is a beautiful song, sung beautifully with a beautiful voice, and it's kind of in the world we're in, the Twitter kind of universe, and the Musks and the Tates and politically what's happening in this country, the NHS and everything else. It's just one of those moments you just hear purity.
If I could just make it stop, I could tell the whole world to get out of the way. If I could just make it stop, if I could just make it stop, breaking my heart, get out of the way. just make it stop.
Well, it's a beautiful record, definitely, and I totally hear what you're saying about the way they managed to. Because I was kind of aware of them and thought I knew who they were, and then the last couple of albums came out, and I was like, "Wow, that is incredible!" And to be able to spring a surprise and keep your integrity, it wasn't a novelty or anything. It was just that was the sound they were making at that time. And also, I feel that what you're saying about when you really love a band and you really put a lot of yourself into music that you listen to. I think like if you really love a piece of music, you're not just actively taking that music; you're putting something of yourself into it. And when something tragic happens, like Mimi dying, or for me it was when David Bowie died. I was a massive David Bowie fan. Still am.
Yeah.
But I couldn't listen. I remember he died, and then I'd already pre-ordered the album Black Star, and I was woken up at 7:00 in the morning by a friend of mine texting me. And he said, just said, "Look, I'm really sorry, but Dave Bowie's died. So you need to turn on the radio." So, I was, properly upset, like someone I actually knew. Died. And I was in tears. I'm not afraid to say it. And went downstairs and just started playing the music and going through it and going through my emotions and thinking about what it meant to me as I was growing up and everything. And then suddenly the postman arrived with a copy of Black Star. And
wow.
The album art itself, it looks like a tombstone. It's just a big black lump of a thing. And I couldn't play that record for maybe 2-3 years. I literally couldn't listen to it because it was too. I had so much involvement in David Bowie over the years. When I was a kid growing up, I felt like I put a big part of me in there, and I felt like if I played that. I don't know. I wondered what would happen. I wondered what would happen to me.
No, I agree. It's an incredible record as well, isn't it?
It is. It is. And again, the capacity to change, even after 35 albums, to bring something out that you just thought, where did that come from? That 10-minute opener on that album is incredible, and the last track.
It's really weird because. He released singles and stuff and some of it before he died, didn't he?
That's right,
obviously he did, but and I can remember hearing it and thinking, wow, that's I hate to say, this sounds a bit weird, but this is my production kind of brain comes in, but I think him changing his band was a massive thing. Him using those players was very, very different and brilliant. I don't think the other band would have been able to do it. I think the other band had. I think obviously he's got his festival touring kind of band. Do you know what I mean? That he's had for many years with those brilliant players. But this needed something else, and
he was always an artist that would just. He would do it. He would say, "Right, this is the last show we'll ever play. Now I'm going to do this."
I know.
And not even tell the band.
Poor old Spiders from Mars, isn't it? This will be our last gig. He says it on stage. It's like, huh? I've just bought a new car on HP.
What's this? I don't know if you know anything more about it, but I've heard that Low are now trying desperately to get their masters back from Universal because obviously they can't tour because the band's been split asunder. So they need to make their money from the music.
So I actually last week just tried to get hold of Alan to talk to him about it because Portishead went through a similar, not as severe as that thing last year. But I've got hopefully I mean because I went through that stuff I've got some ideas that maybe could help out, but hopefully I think there ultimately needs to be a campaign just to go, look, get out, give them back, you're not doing anything with them, just do it.
Do the right thing for us,
But they're a multinational media company. They're most of their kind of talent searches now are based on TikTok. So it's the concept of being fair and just or towards eyes. is well left the building some years ago.
Yeah. Well, we'll certainly encourage people to get behind that campaign for sure, because
I'm not too sure what they're doing yet. I'm sure they'll do something or other.
Before you go, I've got to ask you a couple of questions about one of my favourite albums of the last 20 years, which was The Horrors' Primary Colours.
Oh, right, yeah.
The production on that album was absolutely out of this world. I mean, for me, it just... Everything I loved growing up in post-punk world, bits of My Bloody Valentine, bits of Can, and yet even broader than that, things like the production on Who Can Say, which actually just sounds like a Motown record to me, but sung by goths.
Yeah.
I mean, who would have thought that would have worked anyway? I mean, but that is a real... I mean, for me, that's one of my favourite albums of the last 2 decades. And what was it like to work on that? And how did that come about?
I knew them through their publicist, who's a really good friend of my wife, Em, so we kind of said hello a few times, and they seemed like really nice guys and that. Yeah, they came to me, and I said, yeah, like I'd be up for that, and I listened to the demos, and I thought they were really cool. And then I brought in a guy called Craig Silvey, who is an amazing producer stroke mixer by himself. I knew that, and we'd worked on Third together, in a sense of like he can control when my sonic stuff gets out of control. He can actually go, look, there are people that need to kind of earn some money from this. Do you know, somewhere down the line. So and we worked really well together. And to be absolutely honest, they had all the sounds.
The album before was like very sharp, short, little punky. There was no subtlety in the first album. So that's what I was really interested in. Is like the change that came about in that second album.
They're massive music fans. Yes, they are massive music fans. They're brilliant DJs. All of them DJ. Not one of them hasn't got an incredible record collection, or know the most amazing music. You get Faris DJing, or you get Tom, or you get Joe, and then obviously they're totally. But they've run clubs. They would know so much about they know so much about free beat and reggae. It's and electronic music. They're really into house music, like really early. I can remember I was out in Denmark or something, and the Horrors were playing a club DJ show, and I wasn't a big fan of house music past 1990, and there's all their stuff was like I Will House You and House Nation and like absolutely mental stuff, and I'm like, wow, how do you know this stuff? So when it comes to the album, it was actually very simple because they were so knowledgeable about music, and they've been in this little room and recorded, and they did one track. I can't remember who it was with. Chris Cunningham produced one track.
That's right,
which was really mental how he did that. So I mean, and it's really weird because I produced an album with Adrian from Portishead, the Coral. The Corals record and Invisible Invasion, and they are exactly the same. They are massive music heads, and you're not actually stretching to find ideas. You're actually trying to stop them, all of them coming in at once. You know what I mean? Because
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I can see that.
So much influence and so much great ideas. Like the Coral used to do these compilations called the Cave. I think that was them, and by Ian, the drummer, and I discovered so much music that I then used and took to Third. Like bands compilations, are the best thing. They're like the secret ingredient. You know what I mean? That get passed around, and you all vibe off each other. It's really interesting. But that was a good record to work on that, and I'm glad when it came out, it got the applause it deserved because
I've never
it was
been
a great
angry at the
record.
Mercury Prize committee for not giving it the prize. I was I had a tenner on it actually.
Who won it?
Oh, who was it? Oh, it was. Yeah, I can't remember now. It wasn't the M People year. It was someone else.
The M People, yeah. Arctic Monkeys, I expect, wasn't it, or something?
Yeah, something like that. But anyway, it wasn't the right one. Wasn't your one.
Yeah.
But yeah, the way they fused electronics and guitars, a lot of guitar bands occasionally stick a bit of electronics in there, and it doesn't really work because they don't really know what they're doing. They don't really understand what club culture is. But as you say, it's their knowledge and their understanding that allows them to do that. And
they were massive clubbers. Yeah. I mean, huge club heads. Do you know what I mean? Like massively into techno and early electronic music. So it totally makes sense. You know, they're DJs almost before musicians. Do you know what I mean? Really, those guys, which no one would think. They would just think, oh, look at them with their stupid haircuts. You know,
that's the thing. I remember the first time I went raving, I was a goth as well, and the first time I went raving, I went in skin tight, black jeans.
Yeah.
And I spent the entire night sweating and trying to pull them back over my arse because they kept rolling down. So,
but you look at the Shaman. You look at people like the Shaman.
Yeah,
totally.
Like
that. There's always been that side of rave culture. Goth.
I guess a lot of it comes from that electro body music from Belgium and Front 242 and all that sort of stuff. There's a big crossover there.
Massive. Yeah.
Well, listen, Geoff, I literally could go on all day talking to you. It's been a real joy.
No.
I've really enjoyed listening to your stories and your influences. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on.
Around. No, it's our pleasure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No. And good luck in the future with more oddballs you bring to ramble on.
There's a lengthy list of oddballs that we want to drag onto the show. But we're really glad that you are one of our oddballs, and thank you very much for talking to us today.
All right, well, look after yourself. Thanks for having me on. Take care.
Thanks, Geoff. Really appreciate it.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Okay, I'll speak to you later, man.
I know a fat old policeman, he's always on our street. A fat and jolly red-faced man, he really is a treat. He's too kind for a policeman, he's never known to frown. And everybody says he is the happiest man in town.
Hello, listeners. If you enjoyed this episode, and we really hope you did, and we assume that you did because you've made it all the way to the end, please hit like and subscribe. It helps other people to get wind of the podcast. Or you could just tell a friend how much you enjoyed the pod. Let them know, send them a link, and get them to like and subscribe as well. That would really help us out. And surely you want to help us out. So dig deep, like, subscribe, share. We love you.
He never can stop laughing. He says he's never tried. But once he did arrest a man and laughed until he cried.